I spent the better part of 2 days planning out these walls for my first solo exhibit. You know, lots of hemming and hawing. Should this picture be next to that one or should it be next to that one? Should it go bigger, smaller? Flip this one over to that wall maybe? Lots of nitpicking and indecisiveness, but I've settled on something that I'm very proud of here. I think each wall stands strong on its own, but it's also a good cohesive whole. You know, if you walk in and go to the left and just kind of wrap all the way around, I wanted to make sure each picture flowed nicely to the next and color palettes blended smoothly from one to the other. And I think I've achieved that with this layout, so that's great. Now, in the process of planning these walls, I realized pretty quick that it's gonna cost a lot of freaking money because it's a lot of freaking wall. I have a lot of wall space to cover. I need a total of 29 pieces. I only have 4 already made. I'm gonna have to spend about $5,000 here, maybe $5,500, maybe even more. Oh, that's a lot of freaking money that I don't really have to blow on this. But I'm not about to let that stop me from having this incredible experience, from reaching this major milestone in my photography. Now, I could lower costs by using cheaper materials, maybe. For instance, I'm planning on using anti-reflective glass on all my pieces because I don't want reflections clouding up my work. If I went with just regular glass, that would save some money, but I ain't doing that because my feeling is if I'm gonna do this thing, I'm doing it effing right. We're making it perfect. I'm making it the best I can possibly make it. So it is what it is. I'll be doing 2 pieces measuring 2 foot by 6 foot in a float frame style because at the front of the room, there are these mirrored recessed areas that it's like they're designed for a 2 foot by 6 foot panoramic. It's just perfect. So on one wall, I'll have the Desert Layers piece. And then on the other, I'm hoping I can use a piece I made several years back. It's a 6 foot wide print of the garage that I shot on Route 66. But it's been just in storage in my garage for a little while here. So I just need to pull it out and make sure there's not any damage from it being in the garage for a couple of summers. Now looking at it, I don't see any major damage. I was mostly worried about the lamination, you know, delaminating in the heat. And it all looks great. So I think this will work perfectly. And that's good because that'll save me a few shekels. 4 down, 25 to go. Next order of business was to work out my timeline. So I first called up my framer, Guy Solomon. I wanted to give him a heads up of what's coming down the pike and see how much lead time he'd need for such a big project. Much to my relief, he needed less time than I thought he might.
Okay, God, that's a huge load off my mind.
Because he deals with big projects like this all the time.
Okay.
And knowing Guy, I have no doubts that he'll get everything done right and on time.
All right, thanks, Guy.
Then I called Pro Photo Connection.
Yeah,
I wanted to be sure they could get all 25 prints done
good.
with plenty of time for my framer to do his thing.
Do you know when that's gonna
John over there made it sound like it'd be no problem. And knowing John,
Always a pleasure working with you.
I only have a few dozen doubts that he'll get everything done right and on time.
All right, thanks, John.
So the ball was now in my court. I had to get the files prepped and off to Pro Photo as soon as possible. I needed to make some high-res scans, quite a few of them actually. And like always, I did each as a reverse fluid mount on my Epson, scanned at 3200 ppi. This process is time-consuming and can be tedious, but honestly, I freaking loved the entire Sunday I spent scanning these up. There's something meditative about this part of my workflow for me. And also super satisfying to create these kind of, you know, master files with the colors and tones cemented in just how I want them for all future print runs. And seeing these finely tuned images on my monitors, knowing that they would soon be hanging on a wall in my own exhibit, it just filled me with anticipation and excitement and pride and all sorts of good feelings. The next step was to make the properly sized file for each of the 25 prints. This involves a resizing of the file to print size at 300 ppi, which is done in Photoshop, followed by 1 to 2 rounds of digital sharpening, the exact details of which vary from picture to picture. I'm not going to give a full dissertation on that process here because it's lengthy, and I plan to put out something much more involved on that topic in the future. So, Of the 29 prints I'll be putting on display here, 4 of them will be C-type prints on Fuji Pearl Crystal Archive paper with a luster lamination in a float frame. The first is Desert Layers, another is the Garage piece, the third is Desert Hopper, and the fourth is a new piece I'll be making of a billboard that I shot out in the desert. And I'm actually really excited for that one because I've never printed that image before, so I'm anxious to see it. All of the remaining prints, 25 of them, will be pigment prints on a hand-and-mule paper in a shadow box style frame behind glass. Now in the next video, I'm going to go much more in depth into why I'm doing 2 different print types and 2 different framing styles, because there are definitely pros and cons to each. But when it comes to the pigment prints, I've done a lot of pigment prints. That's what I offer on my website. But I've only ever done it on one type of paper, which is hand-and-mule photo rag. That's a smooth, matte finish paper with excellent archival characteristics. And that's originally what I was planning on doing for everything in this show. But I wanted to try a new paper because I had seen samples of this metallic paper that hand-and-mule makes. So I got an image printed on it, and pretty quickly I decided, nah, we're not going to do that. This paper is really cool. The image does have that kind of silver look to it, almost like a darkroom print, which I do like. But there are some issues. Number one, it's glossy. I just don't like glossy prints. It hides the image so much, especially if it's a dark image like this. The darker the image gets, the more you're seeing the reflections and not the photo itself. So that already was kind of disqualifying the paper for me. But secondly, the paper itself is actually a darker base than photo rag. And that means the images are all going to print a little bit darker. In fact, the shadows on this image came out way darker on this paper than it does on photo rag. And so I would have to run a bunch of test prints and adjust all of my files to compensate for that darker base paper. I just didn't want to go through that hassle. So I'm going to do photo rag like I always do on all of my pigment prints for this show. You can see too, I got a bunch of test prints going here. I'll talk more in the next video about what I was trying to troubleshoot with these and what resolutions I came up with. If you follow my channel, you know I like to print big because I just love seeing my images blown up. But I'm also realistic that not everyone can fit a big 6-foot wide print in their home. And of course, this exhibit is a good stroke to my ego, but ultimately, I'm hoping to recoup some costs here, so I gotta make some sales, baby. And if I'm putting up a bunch of 6-foot wide prints all over the place, I don't think I'm gonna find a whole lot of customers. So the smallest print I'm offering, I'm doing quite a few of these 7x7 inch prints in 11x11 frames. I actually think those are gonna be really cool. Nice little accent pieces for smaller spaces. The biggest, of course, will be 6 foot wide, but those are already made. The biggest I'm gonna be printing right now is 18x54. That's the billboard piece, so that one should be pretty cool. But I'm actually doing quite a few 12x36 inch prints, which is how big this is. And I really like that size on my 6x17 images because it's about a 6x blow up, which gives you great resolution, great detail. You can really appreciate all the finer details of the image, but it's not blown up so big that it's really starting to soften up more than a lot of people would like. Because, I love printing 6 foot wide, but I'll admit, the image does soften up quite a bit at a 12x blow up. Now, one last thing I want to address in this video before we call it a day. If you're a close follower of my channel, you may be surprised to see that I'm including this picture and another picture of a hawk feather in this exhibit. Because if you remember the video where I showed how I took these pictures, you may remember that in the beginning I said, well, I'm not going to sell any prints of these feather images. And that's because after putting out that video, I discovered that it's actually illegal to collect hawk feathers. It might sound like an insane law, but there's a reason for it. If you research it, it kind of makes sense. And once I found that out, I felt it was wrong to be making any money off of these pictures of these feathers. I decided something much more positive can come out of this whole thing rather than just hiding away these pictures from everybody. So I've decided that I'm going to print these pictures, put them in the exhibit, and if they sell, I will make a donation to a raptor rehabilitation and rescue center here in California called the Ojai Raptor Center. They take in injured hawks and eagles and owls and all sorts of birds of prey, rehabilitate them, and oftentimes are able to release them back into the wild. So if these sell, I'm going to send a big old chunk of cash their way. So that's the plan. In the next video, I should have a whole bunch of prints to share with you. And then we'll talk more about the next steps of this whole process. So I'll see you then.